Russia's military appears to be targeting Ukraine's railway network in a series of missile strikes in central and western parts of the country. This comes after the U.S. announced more military aid for Ukraine. So to get more on this, we're joined live by CTV's military analyst, retired Major General David Fraser, also former commander of NATO forces in Southern Afghanistan. Major General, thanks for being here this afternoon. Let's talk about these attacks on the rail and fuel areas and the fact that they're happening in the western part of the country as well. How do you interpret the latest moves by Russia here?
Well, Nick, it's good to be with you. And I think what we can, see within these attacks is Russia trying to interject itself and disrupt the Ukrainian supply chain for any materials that are be going to the front lines around Donbass or anywhere else where the Russians are attacking. And because right now with the West's influx of supplies, this is worrying the Russians, and the Russians are trying to stop that from getting to the point where it can interdict their operations.
Okay, and let's move east now and talk about the situation in Mariupol. There's about 1,000 civilians, maybe 2,000 soldiers in that steel plant there that we've been focusing on for days now. There's talk that perhaps Russia may open up humanitarian corridors, may open up for the civilians there, but the soldiers would remain. There's two parts to this, obviously. The civilian is one side, the soldiers is the next. So I'll let you sort of decide how you want to sort of tackle that one.
Well, first of all, I don't believe anything the Russians would tell us. They may let out 10 or 20 civilians, but quite frankly, they want the civilians there to inflict casualties, to inflict terror, and to keep on, their pressure tactics on Zelensky. And they definitely want to go after those Ukrainian fighters. So this fight in Mariupol will continue until such time as they run out of ammunition or water.
Is there any way to get any more help to those Ukrainian fighters in there?
The only way that Ukraine could do that is from the sea. The fact that the Ukrainians have sunk at least right now 9 Russian vessels, they might be able to get something in there, but it would be a high risk, and getting it to the plant itself would be, I would suspect, almost impossible. So this really is the worst case scenario for those defenders.
Oh, yeah, that certainly sounds that way. Okay, in the meantime, we talked about how these attacks, as you mentioned, the attacks on the fuel, the rail, the supply chain, et cetera. Part of that may have been a reaction to the U.S. Imposed sanctions and more aid from U.S. as well here. The significance of that aid and the fact that, Blinken and Austin were there over the weekend in Kyiv meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky. How do you see that as beefing up and helping the Ukraine effort?
Well, first of all, and probably most important, is the fact that these two senior American officials went to Kyiv and were able to go and sit down and talk to President Zelensky must have just infuriated Putin because, here we have the West and the leaders of the West actually going into Kyiv and talking, and then turning around and leaving a whole bunch of military aid as a gift for Ukraine to fight against the Russians. So the Russians have completely failed in dominating the airspace, failed in taking Zelensky off the airwaves, and preventing the West from interdicting right into the heart of Ukraine.
All right, interesting perspective there. And speaking of sanctions, you yourself came up on that list of 61 Canadians that came out last week from the Putin regime. Your reaction to being sanctioned? I mean, you can't go to Russia anymore, Major General.
Well, it's thrown my summer plans to go to St. Petersburg in Russia. I mean, I've got a ticket for anybody who wants to go. But seriously, it's symbolic. 61 Canadians, including myself, it's just really meaningless from a Russian point of view. But it does indicate one important thing is that the Russians are paying attention to Canada. What we are doing here from a sanctions point of view, supporting the Ukrainians, and what the media is doing, getting the word out, is on the World Wide Web, and it is making a point right back into Moscow, such that Putin is telling his ambassador in Ottawa to go and find people like myself, as if that's going to make a big difference. But we are having a positive impact on supporting those people in Ukraine and their fight against the tyranny of Putin.
Okay, well, let's leave it on that positive note then. Major David Fraser, thanks so much for joining us again here on CB24 Live at noon.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay, take care.